Hello there, you're watching Connecting the Dots, a show that connects the dots to get you the full picture of raging global issues. Recent satellite imagery has put the spotlight once again on what China does best, nibbling at the territories of its neighbours and then swallowing them wholesale. While there are many targets of China's expansionist tactics, today we focus on China's illegal occupation of areas in northern Bhutan. Why is China usurping Bhutanese land? We explore that next. It is an old playbook for China. Every now and then, China pulls out tricks from this same old playbook. What playbook am I talking about? If you want to know what I'm talking about, look closely at this map of Bhutan, published by the British think tank Chatham House. This is Jakalang Valley in North Bhutan, and this is a satellite image dated 13 September 2023. It shows new Chinese construction in that valley. China is constructing new settlements here, after having already constructed a road network here. Yes, you heard that right. This satellite image is evidence of China constructing new settlements in Jakalang Valley on Bhutanese land. Let's look at another satellite image. This one is dated 2nd September 2023, taken just 11 days before the first one you saw. And this one too shows Chinese activity in the same Jakalang Valley. You can spot new construction and land development by China and a Chinese constructed road network. This report by Indian news channel NDTV shows how China scaled up its physical presence in the Jakalang Valley over 2 years. Listen to this. Satellite images dated 7th December 2023 show ongoing construction of at least 129 buildings. They appear to be residential quarters in one settlement. There are at least 62 buildings in a second enclave, a short distance away. Compare these with earlier images from August 2021 of the same area. None of these buildings can be spotted there. So China's illegal occupation of Bhutanese land has not happened in a few weeks or months. This has a long history. Let's go a little further back in time. See this 2021 article in Foreign Policy magazine. It details how since 2015, China has been constructing a network of roads, buildings and military outposts deep in Bhutan's sacred valley. What China has encroached upon is Bhutanese territory that has a very special significance for Bhutan. We will tell you how. Jakalang Valley is part of an area that is traditionally known as the Beol Khenpa Jong. Beol is one of the most sacred locations in Bhutan. Majority of the population here follows Tibetan Buddhist traditions. The word Beol means hidden valley, a term used in traditional Tibetan literature. It refers to at least 7 areas high in the Himalayas ringed by mountain ridges. Legend has it that these areas were concealed by the legendary tantric master Padmasambhav in the 8th century and were only discoverable by those with heightened spiritual powers. Beol Khenpa Jong is the most famous such valley in Bhutan, described in Bhutanese literature and myth since at least the 15th century. What's more, Jigme Namgyal, the father of the first king of Bhutan's current ruling dynasty, was born on the eastern perimeter of Beol, 75 miles from Bhutanese capital Thimphu. The reason why I'm bringing this up is to tell you the importance of the Bhutanese land that the Chinese have nibbled at, encroached upon and settled into. No Bhutanese official would ever formally relinquish this area. What Venice is to Italy or Stonehenge is to Britain, Beol is to Bhutan. So how did Chinese encroachment begin in the Beol? Well, Bhutan's border guards are posted in the Beul each summer. Their task is primarily to defend Bhutanese herders in encounters with their Tibetan counterparts. Why Tibetans? Because for 20 years, China's nibbling in the Beul was carried out not by soldiers but by 4 Tibetan nomads. China used these Tibetan nomads whose families had grazed in the Beul in summers before China annexed Tibet in the 1980s. These nomads set up camp with their yaks. They were joined by other herders in painting the Chinese national flag, the hammer and sickle, or the word China in Chinese on prominent rocks within the Beul. All this they did to reinforce China's claim to the area. From mid-1990s, encounters between Bhutanese and Tibetan herders became more aggressive. The Bhutanese accused the Tibetans of cattle rustling, collecting timber, constructing shelters, driving huge consolidated flocks of yaks across traditional Bhutanese grazing lands, and demanding that Bhutanese herders pay taxes to them for grazing there. These intimidatory tactics meant that by 2005, Bhutanese herders withdrew to the south of the Beul. Bhutanese soldiers posted there, who were dependent on the herders for supplies, went with them. After moving out, neither Bhutanese soldiers nor herders would have known of the construction work by China in the northern Beul. In Thimphu, officials probably assumed that these clashes between herders were minor provocations by Beijing. Such incidents had become common in all the areas of Bhutan claimed by China, and there was no precedent suggesting that they might escalate to major construction and settlement. But China did what Bhutan did not expect. It set up entire villages and military infrastructure on Bhutanese territory. The foreign policy article author Robert Barnett gives a glimpse of China's construction activity in North Bhutan. He writes, in October 2015, China announced that a new village called Gyalafug in Tibetan or Jilubu in Chinese had been established in the south of the Tibet Autonomous Region. Gyalafug is, however, not in Tibet. It is in Bhutan. Gyalafug is a village in Beul Khenjapong area of North Bhutan. And see how China is developing it. Read this excerpt. Gyalafug is now one of the 3 new villages under Chinese occupation or control. 66 miles of new roads, a small hydropower station, 2 Communist Party administrative centers, a communications base, a disaster relief warehouse, 5 military or police outposts, a major signal star, a satellite receiving station, a military base, and up to 6 security sites and outposts. All this infrastructure has been constructed by China to support these villages and sustain PLA's presence in Bhutan's territory. China says these are parts of Lodrak in the Tibet Autonomous Region, but in fact, they are in the far north of Bhutan. What we have told you so far is only about the Beul region, located at an average altitude of 12,000 feet. But there is a second enclave too being settled by China in northern Bhutan. It is called the Menchuma Valley, 1.2 miles to the east of Beul and at an altitude of 14,700 feet at its lowest point. This valley has been under de facto Chinese control for some time. China has denied access to Bhutanese herders and Royal Bhutanese Army patrols in this valley. Troops belonging to China's People's Liberation Army are also believed to be stationed there. So where do things stand today? Today, all of the Menchuma Valley and most of the Beul are controlled by China. Both are being settled. Together, they constitute 1% of Bhutan's territory. If it were to lose them, it would be comparable to the United States losing many or Kentucky. If Bhutanese troops try to re-enter these areas, they will have to do so on foot. And given the lack of infrastructure on the Bhutanese side, it would also be immediately beyond the reach of Bhutanese supplies or reinforcements. Whereas for Chinese troops, it is a different story. They would have barracks close at hand, the troops would be motorized, and they would be only 3 hours' drive from the nearest town in China. So there is a clear asymmetry between the Chinese and Bhutanese militaries in the context of Bhutanese land encroached by China. So what is the history of Chinese territorial claims on areas in northern Bhutan? China's claim to these areas is recent. Both the Beul and the Menchuma Valley were shown as parts of Bhutan on official Chinese maps until at least the 1980s. They still appeared as parts of Bhutan on official Chinese tourist maps and gazetteers published in the late 1990s. So what exactly is China's motive? Why is it claiming and settling in Bhutanese territory? This is the real story. China's interests in the Beol are not primarily about its relations with Bhutan, because Beijing sees its relationship with Thimphu in terms of opportunities it can offer in its strategic rivalry with India. Ever since 1990, China has offered to give up its claim to 495 square kilometers of the Beol if Thimphu will give China 269 square kilometers in western Bhutan. Those areas, Doklam, Charithang, Sinchulungpa, Dramana and Shakhato, lie close to the tri-junction with India and are of far greater strategic importance to China than the Beol. These 5 areas that I mentioned, including Doklam, can offer China a foothold just 62 miles from India's 14-mile-wide Siliguri corridor that connects the Indian mainland to its northeastern territories and lies between Nepal and Bangladesh. So this was China's game plan. China thought that considering the great spiritual significance of the Beol region to the Bhutanese, Bhutan will agree to trade the Beol region for the western border areas, including Doklam. So how did Bhutan respond to Chinese pressure? Despite offers from China of substantial economic aid, Bhutan did not accept the trade-off. It did not want to prejudice relations with India. In 2013, before it began construction work in the Beol, China arranged a joint survey of the valley by Chinese and Bhutanese experts. But this too did not lead Thimphu to accept the deal. China stepped up pressure in the western sector further, leading to the Doklam standoff in 2017. What was the Doklam standoff, you might ask? Well, in 2017, China's attempt to build a road across the Doklam Plateau in southwestern Bhutan, next to the tri-junction with India, triggered a 73-day face-off between hundreds of Chinese and Indian troops. With India and Bhutan both standing up to it, China had to finally abandon its plans. Today, China's offer to trade the Beol for the western border areas still stands. But with little likelihood of Bhutanese concessions, the Chinese presence in the Beol could well become permanent. Yes, it could become permanent. And why are we saying that? That's because Beijing's years-long construction plan has changed the reality on the ground, forcing Thimphu to the negotiating table. The Chatham House report makes the same conclusion. Listen to this. The new outpost in Bhutan's remote Jakalung Valley, part of the Beol-Khenjapong region, may become permanent Chinese territory after an announcement on a border deal between the two countries expected soon. It is thought that Bhutan, in a major concession, will give up the land that China has seized in both Jakalung and the neighboring Menchuma Valley. So given China's continuing unsanctioned construction activity in North Bhutan, Thimphu may have no option but to accept the fait accompli presented by the Chinese in this area. So what exactly happened in the last round of boundary talks between China and Bhutan in Beijing in October 2023? Before we come to this, let's understand the China-Bhutan border and what has happened in the boundary talks so far. Bhutan and the Tibetan Autonomous Region share a contiguous border to Bhutan's north and west of about 470 kilometers. Since 1984, Bhutan and China had held 24 rounds of talks, all aimed at settling their boundary-related disagreements until 2016. Bhutan showed remarkable flexibility in these talks. In the 1980s, it quietly relinquished its claim to the 154 square mile Kulakhari area on its northern border with China. Bhutan called its own claim a result of cartographic mistakes. The October 2023 boundary talks in Beijing took place after a gap of 7 years. But the 7-year period was not all quiet. Thimphu and Beijing maintained active engagement in this duration. In fact, a 3-step roadmap: 1, agreeing to the border on the table; 2, then visiting the sites on the ground; and 3, then formally demarcating the boundary to take the talks forward, was signed in 2021. So during the recent 25th round of boundary talks, China and Bhutan signed a cooperation agreement on Bhutan-China boundary. That agreement builds on the 3-step roadmap finalized in 2021. This is how China's state-run news agency Xinhua puts it. It says, China and Bhutan agreed to accelerate boundary demarcation process and establish diplomatic ties between the two countries. It is important to note here that Bhutan does not maintain official diplomatic ties with China. In fact, Bhutan has had tense relations with China, and Bhutan's foreign policy had until now largely been in sync with India's. But Beijing wants Bhutan to open full relations with it, because that would allow Beijing to have a diplomatic presence in Thimphu. By doing that, China hopes to offset India's influence in Bhutan. So China's border talks with Bhutan are aimed at India. This analysis by Indian publication The Indian Express explains what this means for India. India's immediate worry is the prospect of Beijing forcing Thimphu to acquiesce to Chinese pressure and give away access or even control over the Doklam Plateau. It is not hidden from anyone in New Delhi that China is eyeing a foothold in the Himalayan kingdom because it wants to leverage it in order to corner India. So how should China's actions be seen in the final analysis? Well, as a clear violation of Bhutanese sovereignty and territorial integrity. Chinese settlements within Bhutan go far beyond the forward patrolling and occasional road building that led to war with India in 1962, military clashes in 1967 and 1987, and the deaths of 24 Indian and Chinese soldiers in 2020. China's encroachments openly violate the terms of China's founding treaty with Bhutan. In that treaty, signed in 1998, China recognized Bhutan's sovereignty and its territorial integrity. In that treaty, China agreed that no unilateral action will be taken to change the status quo on the border. Construction of roads, settlements and buildings within the Beyoul in the Menchuma Valley is clearly a violation of that agreement. Chinese encroachments also ignore decades of protests by the Bhutanese about far smaller infractions elsewhere on the borders. Chinese encroachments in Bhutan mirror in the Himalayas its provocative tactics in the South China Sea. But that should not come as a surprise because China has been pursuing expansionist designs for a long time now. Expansionism is crucial to its ideology. Expansionism is the name of the playbook I talked about at the start. Though China claims to have resolved its land borders with all its neighbours except two, India and Bhutan, in reality, China has border disputes with all its neighbours with which it shares its land or maritime jurisdictions. The only exception is Pakistan, which is virtually its vassal state. So what drives Chinese expansionism? China wants centrality in international politics. Its primary strategic goal is accumulation of comprehensive national power that is defined by economic, military, technological and diplomatic global leadership. China uses salami slice strategy to expand its boundaries. It means slowly cutting off piece by piece other nations' territories. So China continuously nibbles at neighbors' land. It even claims an entire area on some dubious historicity and builds up its military control over areas that are vital to its strategic designs. So can China's neighbors effectively counter its expansionist designs? Strong national leadership, robust regional and global partnerships, and capable militaries can deter and deny Chinese expansionism. That's it in this edition of Connecting the Dots. We'll see you next week with more raging issues. Until then, it's a goodbye from all of us in a Delhi newsroom. Take care and stay safe.